Okay, I was watching this video of Alan H. Guth. He's a scientist. He's like one of the most well-known, famous scientists. Thinks a lot about the origin of the universe, and I was thinking that at first, when he first started talking, I was thinking, well, maybe this is might might have some might be significant to my origin of the universe, or might reflect badly on my origin of the universe. But then when they get to listen to him, after a while, it's like, really. But anyways, it is interesting though, so I'm just gonna try to go through it. And this other guy, what's his name? Let me see. Um, the other guy, I forget his interview. His name, I got his name in the description. The interviewer. Um, I just I just closed out all the things, so I'll have to. Uh, I don't know. I forget his name, but I got his name in the description. The guy that interviews. It's pretty interesting. He's got a lot of interesting interviews with people on stuff like the origin of the universe, even belief in God sometimes and stuff like that. But anyway, let me go ahead and watch this video. See if I can do that.
We're here at the FQXI conference, and I think this is at least our fifth time together, maybe over 13, 14 years. And what's been happening recently with all the observational evidence in terms of inflation?
Yeah, well, it's really been beautiful. The observational evidence for inflation has just been mounting up, and as things get measured more and more precisely, it just gets better and better. So, for example, one of the predictions that inflation makes is for the average mass density of the universe. And now that's been confirmed to an accuracy level of about 0.5%.
Wow.
That's exactly what inflation predicts. One of the other important predictions inflation makes is for the patterns of the ripples that are seen in the cosmic microwave background radiation. And the most recent test of those fluctuations is from the Planck satellite. And they summarized the results in a paper they published in 2015, saying that the main result of the experiment was powerful evidence for the simplest models of inflation.
Very
Just
simply,
a wonderful fit.
How does that occur? What is the prediction, and how does inflation predict a pattern?
Okay, good.
So this is what I was talking about. It sounds like he's onto something, so, but the way as the interview progresses, you can see that he's got a lot of speculation that's not really based on much of anything. But it's interesting, and I'd like to see how that would fit, or if it doesn't fit with my idea of just making matter. Yeah, of course, there could be a certain amount of inflation, I guess, but the idea of it inflating forever and ever is kind of nonsensical to me. And as he'll go ahead and explain.
Good question. In inflationary models, these fluctuations are attributed to quantum fluctuations that happen initially at the beginning of inflation on incredibly small size scales, very small wavelengths.
Quantum effects are significant.
Where quantum effects are expected to be significant and are. And then inflation stretches these out to become macroscopic and visible in the microwave background. And because the pattern is determined by quantum physics, we can predict what that pattern is.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
That's really crazy. I mean, like, what do you say? A quantum fluctuation and inflation makes it the quantum fluctuation to be a macro inflation, macro fluctuation or something. Total nonsense.
How about your own theoretical thinking over the last few years?
Yeah, well, one of the key mysteries still about inflation, really, is how we handle the fact that almost all versions of inflation have the property that once they start, they never completely stop. We call it eternal inflation. It's really future eternal inflation. It goes on forever, producing what we call pocket universes. And the difficulty with that is how to define probabilities, because everything that's allowed by the laws of physics will happen an infinite number of times in this multiverse. So it's very hard to know what you're talking about when you say that something is more common than something else.
Sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook to me. It's eternal inflation that has a starting point. Makes no sense.
Multiple infinities.
So you have multiple infinities that you're trying to compare. So people have been wrestling with that, and it's still pretty much an open problem. But we have a number of different proposals for how to regularize the infinities, how to extract finite numbers from the infinities. We don't even know what the right recipe is. But the recipes that give sensible answers seem to all have the property that they prefer small amounts of inflation rather than huge amounts of inflation. While in the old days, we used to think that huge amounts of inflation looked much more plausible.
What's the input?
So the inflation is getting smaller and smaller. It just that means that his mathematics is whatever he wants it to be, I guess.
There are a few implications. One is that it means that our pocket universe is probably not as big as we once thought it was. In the quote, old days, we used to think that our pocket universe was tens of orders of magnitude larger than what we currently observe.
I remember you told me maybe 10, 13 years ago that it was like 10 to the 22nd power.
Yeah, that was a reasonable guess at the time. Right. That was my guess at the time. 10 to the 22 times larger than what we observed. Which is a very crude guess, of course.
Yeah.
But now we think...
you said that at the time.
Yeah, I hope I said that. That's good. I don't like to be accused of overstating my certainty about these things, because one shouldn't. But now with this issue of solving the measure problem, it casts a different light on what seems most plausible
for our pocket universe.
For our pocket universe.
And again, pocket is an arbitrary term that people can think is in your pocket, but it's many orders of magnitude still larger than the whole universe that we see.
So what they're not really considering is how much energy or power it takes to make a universe. So they're apparently they have all the power in the world or in the universe or multiverse to make as many universes as they want, and they're not even thinking about where the power is coming from or the energy is coming from or what the source of the energy is even. And they're just speculating as to, well, what he's trying to do. He's trying to get out of entropy. He's trying to, you'll see in a little bit, he's trying to, break the law of entropy or get out of having to follow or keep the law of entropy.
Yeah, but now we think probably just a few orders of magnitude. Maybe a factor of 1,000 larger than what we say.
So 10 to the third rather than 10 to the 22nd. Something like that. That's a big difference, but it's still big.
Still big, yes. And it's still, of course, in this view of reality, only one of an infinite number of pockets.
Sure. But it's important to understand that. And to me, in such a short time to come to that kind of narrowing of the understanding of the size of the pocket universe based on inflation is really a remarkable kind of narrowing of the gaps and increasing our confidence levels.
Yeah, see this change in the size of the universe like that, to me that's unimpressive to me, so I don't think that even affects my idea of the origin of the universe as in the formation of matter, which has gravity, which causes the dilation of time and space. So I don't even think it's going to even would even affect it, because he changes the size of his universe arbitrarily. So I don't even think his math is relevant at this point.
Well, that's true. That's true. I think I'd be more enthusiastic if I thought we really understood this measure problem, rather than the fact that we're just taking this one inference from it.
All right, so that's still left to do.
So there's still a lot to do.
We always then have the question, given everything that you say is correct, which most people, but not all, say that it probably is. What happened before? How did inflation start? How did you, whether it was a 10 to the minus 39th, the second, but what happened before that? Right. And where are we?
Where are we? Well, we still certainly don't know the answer to that question. And inflation, in fact, makes it a particularly difficult question to answer, because the gigantic expansion associated with inflation, really from an observational point of view, essentially completely erases any evidence of what came before. So thinking about what came before is pretty much entirely a theoretical issue.
What are some of the options? What are some of the differences that people...
See, my idea of the creation of the universe is that there is no before, there's just eternity, and infinite time and distance are dilated down to a quantized measurable time and distance, from the force of gravity as a result of the creation of matter.
Yeah, well, there are options. There are things people have been thinking about. One possibility that people have thought a lot about, and that has several variations, is the idea of a quantum origin of the universe. Tunneling from something, or not, some version of nothing. And there are different versions of nothing.
Versions of nothing. Yeah, right. It's not explaining anything, and it's laughable. Talking about nothing becoming something. Trying to explain how nothing or some kind of version of nothing is going to become something. If you have a fluctuation, you got time and space. So it's not nothing, because in order to have time and space, you have vast amounts, huge amounts of matter in order to even have time and space to begin with.
But yeah, the idea is that somehow quantum physics can start with a state of nothingness and tunnel to a small universe which then undergoes inflation.
Right.
And there are different versions of that, and they're still all on the table, I think.
Right.
And it's certainly one of the possibilities for how inflation could have started.
How about your own thinking?
Yeah, my own thinking has actually tended towards another direction, something that was really started by Sean Carroll, and I'm collaborating with Sean Carroll on a paper about this now that we've been admittedly collaborating for some number of years now and haven't quite gotten into actually drafting it, but the ideas are there. The idea basically is that if, and we're not sure, but if the universe is described by a physical system which has no maximum entropy, if the entropy can be arbitrarily large.
Okay, here he's going to try to get out of obeying the law of entropy.
Then the problem that people have always talked about of explaining why the universe started in a state of low entropy, which is the standard picture, really goes away, because it means that any state is a state of low entropy because it's low compared to the maximum, which with the infinite is that
which makes no sense, because we're going from a state of a considerable amount of order to a state of disorder. And so if there's an end to the universe, there's a beginning to the universe, and energy can't order itself. It can't make itself. Energy has to come from an infinite potential, and it can't bunch itself up. Energy can't bunch itself up into an ordered state. That's what, in other words, that's what entropy is. It's in a low, like what they say, a low point of entropy is a high state of order, or a high a high amount of temperature in one place and not in another place, so that the radiation of the temperature is going on until there's no more temperature, basically.
Possible that you can have increasing disorder?
Yeah, it is. And certainly from the classical viewpoint, what eternal inflation leads to, it just keeps growing and growing exponentially forever, and the entropy will just keep increasing exponentially forever. We're not sure if that should be trusted at the quantum level. This is our picture.
Right, that's what doesn't make sense, because it can't just go on forever and ever, because if it does, it still has to have a starting point. It still has to go from a low state of entropy to a high state of entropy. And how can it order itself? And the way they even talk about it is all confusing anyways. It doesn't, people have a hard time understanding what they're saying half the time, because of the way they're saying it. But it is a law of science, but it's a little bit confusing, because the low state of entropy means a high state of order. Then you go from a low state to a high state of entropy means you're going from order to disorder.
My classical, but the idea that the maximum entropy is infinite is quite plausible, although we don't know for sure. But if that is the case, then the low entropy problem really disappears, and furthermore, it gives a real
You wish it disappears.
Picture of the arrow of time. We think that the logically initial state of the universe, that is where we start describing it, could have been pretty arbitrary.
Well, the arrow of time would have to be from the dilation of time. That when you slow down time, because time is slowed down to where we are, because time would be instant. Outside of time and space would be instant. It would be eternally instant. But where we are, time is dilated down to no time, if that makes any sense.
Follow that state to the future, entropy will start to grow. We have in mind eternal inflation will start, although we don't really know how to fill in the details there. And we would automatically get an arrow of time, because we start. Entropy would be going from its initial value, whatever that was, towards its maximum value, which is infinite. At the same time, if you think about that initial conditions that we imagined and follow them in the opposite direction in time, entropy will start to go in that direction too. So people living back there would also see an arrow of time, but it would point the opposite direction. It would point downward in this space-time diagram.
So then people get younger and younger?
No, it just means that that their perception of that they would get older that way.
Oh.
It's true, if you follow them this way, they will get younger and younger. So actually, the truth is what you said. But they themselves would not look at it that way. Right. They would look at that as being the future, and they would see themselves getting older.
So there's still some stuff to be done. There's still some stuff to be done, right?
Oh, there's still lots to be done.
Okay.
Lots to be done.
Yep, still a lot to be done, that's for sure. And basically, really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What's up, Wild Heart? How you doing? How do you know God can create an order energy? Well, the God is the source of the infinite potential. God is the infinite potential. He is the source of energy. So, and it has to be an infinite potential, infinite source of energy. Hello, Fyodor. How you doing? Stepping up to the plate, yeah. A little bit shaky, but hey, Fyodor says Good stuff, stepping up to the plate and having debates on modern day debates, and have a good one. All right, thank you, Fyodor. Okay, so yeah, the you can't have energy unless you have a source of energy, and the source of energy has to be infinite potential. It can't be a small amount of energy leading to a greater amount of energy, because that's not physically possible. And an equal amount of energy likewise doesn't work, because it has to come from somewhere and go somewhere. In other words, the heat has to radiate away. I mean, the energy, of course, is in this form of heat, and or you might say vibration of the molecules, and of course the making of the molecules too. Of course, the making of the molecules requires a lot of energy. But of course, we're talking about stuff that we really don't know all that much about. But if you go by what we observe, we can observe that time and space is the result of the creation of matter, because it's the mass of matter that causes gravity, that has gravity, which causes the dilation of time and distance. So time and distance is like I said, the result of the matter that's created. So all right, well, yeah, this guy Alan Guth, he's one of the thinkers. Of course, there's Lawrence Krauss, and he mentioned Sean Carroll, and but this whole thing about the fluctuation causing inflation and stuff, that doesn't make any sense at all, because you can't have a fluctuation unless you have time and space, and you can't have time and space unless you have huge amounts of matter. So you have to first have huge amounts of matter in order to have time and space, in order to have a fluctuation, which I could have told Stephen Hawking, and the other guy, I guess it was Roger Penrose that worked with Stephen Hawking on that. So that's what he said in the previous debate. But anyways, it's stuff we really don't know what we're talking about, and I think we should stick to the observations of what we see happening as to the origin of the universe. It took a lot of energy to make huge amounts of matter, which causes the dilation of time and distance. Like a lot of atheists are known to say, well, why did God make such a big universe? What use is that? Well, it happens to be that big universe that's the cause of the dilation of time and space. The fabric of time space that we exist in, where physical things can happen, is the results of the huge amounts of matter, massive amounts of matter. So it does have a purpose, and it's all for his glory. I mean, it's all by his power. It's all to his glory, whether or not we think it is or not. So it's, all power comes from him. We don't get any of the glory, because anything we do and everything we do is by the power that he gives us, either whether it's by wisdom, understanding, or just physical strength, power. It's power that he gives us. So anything we do is by his power that he gives us. So he gets all the glory anyway. So that's the whole thing about the Calvinist thing, about whether or not who is the one that chooses and who is the one that gets the credit. It doesn't matter if you're the one that chooses to do something, because we do it by the power that God gives us, so he gets the glory anyways. We don't get the glory for what we choose to do. And he made us God, and God is able to make all grace abound towards us, so that we always, having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good deed. So the glory is all his, and he is able to work in us to will and to do of his good pleasure. So, and that's by his spirit of truth that enlightens us to walk in his way, to walk in truth. So, I think that's about it. Let's see what we got here. When you say it makes no sense, do you mean it doesn't require a God? Um, well, I don't know what that means, making no sense. Well, their idea of what caused the universe is not making sense. I mean, it does make sense that it's the matter that's causing the dilation of time and distance. And of course, the making of matter requires a maker, requires a source of energy, a source of infinite energy potential. Because matter can't make itself. I mean, energy can't make itself, and it can't order itself. And energy not only exists, but it's ordered, and it's going from order to disorder. So that's the whole point of what they're trying to get around, is the entropy of it going from order to disorder. I never noticed God giving me power I could do with a top up if you speak to him. LOL. With a top up. Oh, a top off. Okay. Yeah, all the power you have is given to you by God. And I don't know, maybe some vitamin D and some, let me see. Yeah, probably some resveratrol might be good too. Some resveratrol, vitamin D, and some fish oil and stuff like that. That'll give you power. But that's all from him anyway. See, you said fluctuations. Oh, the fluctuation didn't make sense. Yeah, the fluctuation, the fluctuation as a cause of the universe doesn't make sense, because you can't have a fluctuation unless you already have time and space. And the only way you can have time and space is if you have massive amounts of matter causing the time and space where you can have a fluctuation. And the fluctuation is a result from energy that's already there anyway, because, even in the quantum realm, the energy that's in the vacuum of space isn't coming from nowhere. I mean, it's coming from somewhere, and that somewhere is more than likely from the gravity, from the dilation of time and distance. And it's a forward arrow of time. I have to think a little bit more about the arrow of time, but it's at least where we are, it's a forward arrow of time. They have mathematics that where time goes backwards, or time switches around with space, and space is time and time is space and stuff like that. But that's just math. It's like saying there's a negative number of things over there. Doesn't really make sense. It's just mathematical, but it doesn't really make sense. Okay. Fish oil is from God. I thought he was a spirit. Not well. Yeah, everything is from God. Everything is by the power of God. He's the creator of all things. So the the oil definitely is from God. Oil in the Bible signifies the Holy Spirit. As a matter of fact, it's a picture of the Holy Spirit. But it's lamp oil, but that's same thing. Oil is oil basically. Only there's different oils that are good for you. You know, there's of course there's vitamin D that's oil soluble. There's all different kinds of oils that are good for you. There's cod liver oil, there's fish oil, there's um see, when is my debate? I didn't see a debate yet, but they invited me yesterday to participate in the discussion, but I didn't see the invite because I was doing my own channel, my own thing here. But they did say something about another debate though with somebody, but I haven't seen an email on that yet. But I did two debates. I did two debates so far. So I did one with the raging atheist, and the other one with another atheist, um, frustrated atheist, two atheists. But they're already uploaded on my channel and on modern day debate channel. So yeah, all power is from God. That's the whole point. So if all power is from God, then we might be gods, but we get our power from God. All gods get their power from God. And of course, Jesus said you might be a god or you are a god, nevertheless you'll die like men. That's what Jesus said. He said you are all gods, nevertheless you'll die like men. So when atheism says there are no gods, they're trying to say there are no powers. They're trying to say there are no people. I mean, by definition, we are gods. Okay, they must be happy with you if they're asking you back. Yeah, I guess they are, yeah. And they mentioned talking with an actual geologist. And I guess they got to get in contact with an actual geologist to maybe have a debate with me or a discussion, whatever. Because there's not really much I can tell a geologist, but I mean there is, but I do have a lot of questions for the geologist. So that would be interesting. Because I am a layperson, but as a layperson, if we're going to understand what geology is, we have to be able to understand it on our level. So if I ask the questions, maybe he can give me some answers, and such like that. Atheism doesn't say there are no gods. It just says I don't believe in any gods. Well, atheists say they don't believe in God, but atheism doesn't have a positive position. It can't tell you what is. It can only attempt to say what is not. And that's what atheism does. It attempts to say what is not. So, and it fails at that because obviously we exist. We are gods by definition. So there are gods. And atheism is nothing, basically. So, and saying you don't believe in any gods isn't saying anything. That's not a positive position. Especially when there are gods, by definition. Yeah, some atheists do Not all atheists. Yeah, well then the whole thing. But if you're not saying there is no God, then what's the point of atheism? You don't believe there's not a God. That's what's that? That's not even a position. Not saying anything or proving anything. Of course, it never did anyways. But because atheism has nothing to say about what is, has absolutely nothing to say about what is, and it attempts to say what is not, and or suggests to say what is not, or doesn't believe in what is, or something. It makes no sense at all. To me, it's useless. Agnostic is a better definition of what people are. They don't believe in God, but they do believe in naturalism. Atheists also do believe in naturalism. So it's not like they don't believe in powers. They do believe in powers themselves. They believe in the power of nature, in naturalism. They believe nature does magical things. That's what they believe. Everybody that's a national, it's the only thing you can believe. If you don't believe in God, you have to believe in nature, that nature is magical, that matter is magical. So, okay, we got this here, and we got, it's not afraid to say, I don't know. Yeah, but if you're saying I don't know, there's really nothing you can tell me. And we're saying we do know. We do know there are powers, and we know that all power comes from God, because power can't come from itself. It can't order itself. It can't make itself. It has to come from an infinite potential, which is the definition of God. So the existence of anything is proof of God, basically. So you make up a story that I like, yeah, but I'm not making up stories. I'm just going by what the evidence is and what the evidence shows. It's I'm not making up a story that we have a creator. I'm not making up a story that energy goes from order to disorder. This is the evidence that points us to God. It's the evidence that points to an infinite potential of all wisdom, all understanding, all power, all knowledge, and of course perfection, because without perfection he would self-destruct. God would self-destruct. And the fact that we are existing as imperfect beings proves that there's a perfect provision for us. Not you, JJ, just theists in general. Yeah, well, yeah, theist is, I guess if you want to call it, a weak theist wouldn't necessarily believe in Jesus, I guess. I don't know. But the kind of theist, the absolute theists that absolutely believe in an absolute, all-powerful, all-knowing God, we're going by what the evidence shows. It's also what we believe because it's what the Bible tells us, but it's also what the evidence leads us to believe too. It's what the evidence shows. So it's not just a belief, it's a belief in the truth. So absolutely. I don't know if Wild Heart's agreeing with me or not, but said absolutely. So if anybody has any comments, later in watching the video about the origins, I'd be interested in seeing what other people think about the origin of the universe, whether or not you can have a fluctuation without time and space and things like that. Because obviously you have to have time and distance if you have a fluctuation. And which is not, they're not making any sense. They're just trying to get out of having to obey the law of entropy. As you could see in the video, he was trying to evade or avoid the law of entropy. Yeah, he admitted it as much as that. He actually said, that way we don't have to obey the law of entropy. We could just keep having entropy. It just doesn't make any sense. But, if you're going from one place to another, that means you have to have a starting place. There's a starting place and an ending place. It's not going to keep going forever and ever. You have to have energy and input for that. Your evidence is the Bible. Isn't that circular? It's both. It's both. It's the evidence is creation. That's one evidence. The other evidence is God speaking to us, which is the Bible. So that's two witnesses. It's not circular. Do I go to church? That's a good question. I do once in a while. I haven't been going too often because of some issues that I have, but I do like to go to church, and I do go to church sometimes. It would be, if I do go, it would be either a Messianic Hebrew Christian or a congregation, or a fundamental Bible believing congregation. That's what I would go to. But yeah, it's good. It's good to go to church, because that way you can congregate not just with people on the internet, which is good too, but you have to congregate in some form or fashion. That's for sure. Of course, some people can't. They just physically can't, get out and be a part, and it's a big hassle for some people too, but it would be good to go if you can. Don't follow my example. Of course, I've been to many churches, in my lifetime, and I've participated, and I've been a part of the worship team and everything. So, and it's just a matter of me figuring out which church I should be going to right now. So, that's good. Hopefully. Yeah, I'm interested in this, the origin of the universe. I think it's pretty clear that matter has to exist first before you can have time and space. And the fabrication of time and space is made or exists and is being stretched by the huge amounts of matter which is contained in the black holes around the universe. So it's like a three-dimensional tent with three-dimensional tent poles, which are the gravitational wells scattered throughout the universe, which dilate time and distance for physical things to be able to take place, which is our existence. So right now, I don't think there's a backwards time arrow for us, because it would be like saying there's a negative number of things over there. It doesn't really make sense. But I have to think some more about that, though. So, but then again, a lot of stuff doesn't make sense to us. But this idea of instant communication and instantly arriving photons and stuff, you're talking outside of the dilation of time and space. That's evidence of eternity, of being outside of the dilation of time and space. Even though we're not able to be there, at least we know there is such a thing just by observation alone. We know because we can observe the photon, and we can also observe entangled particles, which are instantaneous. So there is such a thing as eternity, or being instant. No amount of time or distance. So, and that's not the realm that we're at right now. So, let me see. 45 minutes. I guess that's good enough. I'll just go ahead and stop right here, and hope everybody goes to church. And I'll be going to church soon enough myself.